The TLDW. Baking cards in the oven is risky, as the seller of this R9-90X found out. And in my case, keeping an eye on the auction sites can sometimes pay off big. It all started with an ad for an R9-90X sold as defective. The ad mentioned a failed attempt at baking the card in the oven in an attempt to get rid of some artifacts that the card exhibited. As the former owner mentioned, the electrolytic capacitors blew up when baking the cards at 250 degrees. I will not go into details as to how to bake a video card in the oven. This is not the topic of the video. I bought the card with the intent of replacing the mentioned capacitors. However, since the caps got blown while attempting to fix another problem with the card, I wanted to limit as much as possible the amount of investment into this card. So instead of buying the polymer caps needed, I had a different plan. I intended to buy a defective motherboard that seemed to have most caps that I'd need to fix the card, salvage the components and use those to fix the R9-90X. After getting the video card and disassembling it, I did notice that the power delivery stage had some problems with its capacitors, just as the seller mentioned. The more affected caps were the ones placed on the external 12 volts power line. Now, these caps serve two purposes: filtering, and more importantly, to store some energy reserve to cover for the transient power spikes that the GPU might cause under certain load conditions. The ones placed after the VRMs and the chokes, the 82 microfarads at 2.5 volts, seem to be in a better shape, but just by a little. If the 330 microfarads at 16 volts ones were bulging out severely, to the point that one of them ended up completely loose, the 2.5 volts rated ones showed just a bit of doming. I decided to pull the trigger on the defective motherboard as well and contacted the second seller. I picked up the board from his home. The asking price for it was about $2, but he ended up just giving it away for free, thanking me for helping him to get rid of it. One man's trash, another man's treasure, as they say. I desoldered all the capacitors from the graphics card and proceeded to do the same with the 2.5 volts rated ones from the motherboard. I decided against salvaging the 16 volts ones from the motherboard, at least for now. They were too tall and they would interfere with the radial fan of the video card. So I opted to desolder instead some 16 volts caps from the dead GTX 960 I mentioned in another video, link in the description. But those were not enough. So I opted to use plain electrolytic caps for the 12 volts input, the only ones that I had at hand that would fit. Another change from the original caps was their value. Instead of 330 microfarads, all of my 16 volts rated caps were 220 microfarads. This would mean less resilience in the face of a power consumption spike, but I hoped that they would be good enough, and also hoped that the PSU that I was using already had good filtering caps on its output. Did the recap work? Did the previous owner manage to get rid of the artifacts he was getting? Yes, and well, yes. The PC booted with the card in it. The image displayed without any issues. The driver package detected the video card, GPU-Z showed the correct info. And Heaven ran fine. The only worrying issue was the temperatures reported by the card, despite the usage of the MX4 thermal compound. But even that got fixed with a tweak of the fan curve. So yes, the R9290X managed to live another day. I will end this video with a warning though. Baking the card, using the heat gun, reflowing or reballing are not quite proper fixes. Yes, the device will run again, but typically not for long. It might, however, be just enough to keep you going until you get a proper replacement. But even that got fixed with a